Thank you, Alicia. Hello, everyone. I am Suzanne Lawrence. I'm the CEO of Advisor Business Solutions. We are the founding partner with the BLX program, and we work very closely with all the firms that participate to sign up to hire interns. And what we do is we meet with everyone individually so that we can understand what your hiring needs are and why you're interested in being in the program. And then we actually provide matchmaking with all of the intern candidates who are pre-qualified so that we can help you with having basically a very strong candidate pool to consider for hiring for your firm. I'd like to thank you all for making time today to be able to join us, and do really support firms who want to have very successful internship experiences. So this webinar is a perfect example of some of the ways that we want to make you have a very rich internship experience with support and resources. If you are interested in participating for this upcoming summer 2024 period, the application period has begun, and we encourage you to apply soon because we would like to schedule time to meet with you before the holidays begin. And then in January is when the matchmaking begins. So we want to keep the whole process easy, but flowing and moving forward for everyone. This afternoon, we're happy and honored to have JD Bruce share his wisdom on how to be successful with your internships. JD is a mindful and dynamic consultant for firms needing transparent guidance and tech integration solutions for strategic growth. He's also an organization leader with Global Association of Independent Advisors called Gaia, who are focused on financial planning worldwide. And they recently met in Switzerland in September. JD was a key leader driving growth and innovation at Abacus Wealth Partners for over a decade, managing over $2.5 billion. And our connection with JD is he was one of the very first leaders to come to us from an enterprise firm who was interested and very excited about being able to hire diverse interns. JD was fantastic to work with. He hired at least 10 interns, and we are still getting updates for interns who were hired full-time, became associate advisors, and now they're getting their CFPs. So we're seeing the program work end to end, and we're having a true impact on bringing in diverse professionals into the industry. We are thrilled to have JD with us today. And JD, I would like to say a huge thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the talk today. And we're going to go through a lot of my experiences running the BLX intern program at Abacus Wealth for 2 years. In the first year, we had 6 interns. In the second year, we had 4 interns. I'll tell you why we shrunk them as we go through the process. And we ended up hiring 3 of them full-time. Abacus does continue to participate in BLX, but I have left Abacus this year in January. So this last summer was their first run without me, and I'm sure it went very, very well. In fact, I just got a text from the first intern we hired into a full-time position through the program, and she just passed her CFP exam just the other day. So it's very exciting. It's a fantastic program. So what I want to share with you today are some of the ways I structured the program at Abacus and how it went, and some of the things we did very well, that worked very well, and also some of the things that I urge you all to avoid doing because they didn't work so well for me. So we'll get started. The new secret news, it hasn't been announced yet, so you can all keep it under your hat. Even if you're watching the recording, you can don't share it on social media yet. But I have joined my consulting practice in with Herbers and Company with Angie Herbers. and I'll be operating through them going forward. So let's get started. Whoops. All right. In my mind, you have three components of a successful internship. First, you need to decide what your purpose is, right? Why are you doing this internship? In my mind, there are three, great reasons, but you kind of have to pick your main one. Now, you're all going to look at these and say, well, what's all of those, right? I like all of them, but primary purpose is primary. You only get one primary purpose. So pick one, and that's the one you're going to focus on. Is this a recruiting funnel, right? Are you looking to actually hire new associate advisors or other positions within your firm, and you're looking to try people out? That is a great and effective way this internship can help you. Are you just looking to broaden your own perspective? Do you just want to get some people into your organization to help kind of challenge you to think bigger, think differently, think from another person's perspective, and just better understand the landscape? Also a very valid reason to do these internships. Or are you but are you doing this because you want to give back to the industry? You want to participate in helping new entrants to the financial planning profession get some experience and then be able to use that to go off and find jobs, and you're just looking to give back. Also a great reason. And you might have other reasons as well, but you can't focus on all three, right? And that's just generally good advice for you. You can't focus on more than one thing. You can have more than one reason to do things, but you got to pick the focus so you can continue to operate. So at least you can be effective in that focus area. All right. The next big part of an internship. People learn to be professionals, in my mind, through observation and getting actual hands-on experience doing this work. And so shadowing is one of the greatest ways to help people learn how to be an advisor. I can think, as I went through my experience learning to be an advisor, which was a little maybe more non-traditional because I started as management and then started taking on clients many years later. But as I think about that, I think of those times where I shared a client with someone else and something crazy happened in the meeting, like the client started screaming or crying, or we're talking about a particular area, and seeing how the experienced advisor handled that situation taught me more than anything I could have learned anywhere else. And so in my mind, to create a good internship, identifying 2 or 3 areas that they can shadow through is a pretty big key to success. I think it must absolutely include being in client meetings. I think that is a absolute requirement for your interns to feel like they got a good experience. It should also include some rotations through operational functions. Now, you might be the only person at your firm, or you might have a team of 2 or 3. At Abacus, I had a team of 70. And so taking 4 to 6 interns and having them rotate through different areas of the business was a little bit less taxing on the teams they were shadowing than it would be at your firm. I spent most of my time working with the interns for those 2 months. Plus, I had an assistant who was helping me with those interns for that period of time. But if it's you alone or you with a couple of staff and you have someone for 8 weeks, you just have to remember what hat you're wearing. So sometimes you're wearing your advisor hat, taking them through advisor work, advisor issues. Other times you'll have your operational hat on or your CEO hat on. Sometimes you'll have your I'm doing the dishes hat on. Let's leave the interns out of that one, is generally best practice. But other than that, whatever hat you're wearing, let them experience that hat and be explicit about what hat you're wearing when you're dealing with your intern. Right now, I'm focusing on operational stuff. So you're going to come shadow me on some operational work. Hey, I'm going into this client prep meeting. So you're going to shadow me on that client prep meeting, right? Make sure they know what that looks like so that if they're later at a firm with 20 people, they kind of can remember about that hat moment. Okay, now even if you have a part-time intern, and I had part-time interns and I had full-time interns over those couple of years, even if you have a part-time intern, you are not going to be able to keep them busy the whole time, right? Unless that's all you're doing is just kind of babysitting your intern. And I don't recommend that. You need to give your intern some time where they can go off and do some stuff on their own. You need a break from each other. Otherwise, it just gets to be a bit too much. The way I handled that and the way I recommend handling it, because I think it works very well, is to create some kind of research project. This is not just a admin work. It's not like, hey, go clean up our lead list and delete everyone with a bad email address. You can give them that work, and that's fine. Try and keep that kind of stuff to a minimum, certainly not the majority of their time. But if it's 20% of their time, you have them working on some admin projects, that's fine. If they really lack experience, sometimes those projects are actually very fulfilling. I had one intern who had really low experience in kind of an office business setting. And so we had her doing some kind of phone calls and data entry for one of our kind of investment partners. She went out and did a project where she reached out to various boards of directors to understand what their board makeup looked like, right? It wasn't very self-directed, and it was very administrative in nature, but for her, it was a perfect kind of stretch growth work, right? For most of the interns I had, about half were career changers, and the other half had some, other experiences in work. That would have felt a little bit administrative and tedious for them. But for this particular intern, it worked perfectly because it was something she'd never really done before. But in general, I think if you think about various kind of innovations you might be thinking about, coming up with some research project they can work on when in their downtime is the key. Something that they can work on independently without needing to ask you. It really, really works. There are other benefits to that research project that I'll talk about in just a second. Any questions so far? You can either raise your hand, blurt it out, or type it in chat. I'm good with all three. All right. Okay. Your purpose. If your purpose is to recruit, you should be thinking about your whole internship as a very extended job interview, right? You're going to want to sit with those people and really, sorry, I'm just moving something out of the way here. You want to put that person in challenging situations, and then you'll know how they're going to respond as an employee, right? You're going to have this person for 8 or longer number of weeks, really put them through their paces, right? If you're trying to build a recruiting funnel as opposed to hiring this person directly. So if you have, for example, someone coming in between their junior and senior year, you're not going to hire that person right away. They have a whole other year of school. You might hire them part-time or whatever if you want to, but for the most part, those people in the middle of junior to senior year are more about building a recruiting funnel than recruiting them personally. And what that means is they're going to go back after that internship and they're going to talk to all their friends in their financial planning program at school. And they're going to tell them about this awesome internship they had, so that in a year, when you post a job ad, or even right then when you post a job ad, people from that university have heard of you. You have a much better reputation there than you did before. A lot of the big professional firms, like all the big accounting firms, when they have these internships between junior and senior year at university, it's all about getting 1 or 2 students to go back there and talk about how amazing working at PricewaterhouseCoopers is. It's very, very effective. If you're just looking to expand your perspective, I definitely urge you to find interns who are a little bit kind of outside the norm. In both of the years that I did that, I held one intern slot for a non-traditional intern. In the first year, we brought them on from outside the program, but they kind of participated in the program still. But it was actually a client of ours who wanted to learn more about financial planning because she was a doula educator and wanted to add financial planning education into the kind of pre-parenting classes that she was teaching. So she was teaching doulas to be able to tell people about how to better manage their money while they were in childbirth preparation classes. Like, well, that's really interesting. Yeah, you can be the intern. That's perfect. In the second year, we had someone who was studying to be a social worker. And she wanted to do add financial education into her social work. And I thought that was super, super interesting. And as a firm, we learned a tremendous amount from her about kind of some of the social work methodologies and how we could use that in our financial planning practice, and introduce us to concepts that we don't study in financial planning. But we felt like were easy to use. So if you're really just not looking to hire, I definitely urge you to try some people who are a little outside the norm. They will bring you some very interesting learnings from their own areas of expertise. Okay, rotations. First of all, I had a lot of my advisors at Abacus a little concerned about the idea of bringing an intern into a client meeting. They're like, oh, I don't want the clients to be nervous. Won't they, be a little less willing to, share details? And I did not find that to be the case in actuality. So first thing I can say is don't worry about it, right? Clients absolutely love it. I would always ask, right? I'd go to the client and say, hey, I'm going to have an intern joining us for our client meeting. Is that okay with you? We do the same background checks and the same, every bit of compliance stuff with them that we do with our employees. And so they're just as safe to talk to, and they understand confidentiality, and they're like, oh yeah, that sounds great. Tell me more about this program. And so then I spent 30 minutes talking about BLX and how cool it is. And then the problem with bringing the interns to the meeting is the client then takes up about a quarter to a half of the meeting just talking to the intern and interviewing them. Like, what are you doing? Are you want to get in this program? Or what school are you going? I'm like, we need to talk about money. And they're like, oh, hold on just one more second. And it's very entertaining. And the clients actually start taking ownership of the internship itself. They're like, oh, let me help them. Hey, in fact, let me introduce you to, I've had clients trying to, introduce my interns to other people and help them as well. It's really fun, and the clients absolutely adore it. You need to train them, right? Not to start talking about financial matters in meetings. Right? They can't not talk in meetings, because with my associate advisors, I just tell them, don't talk in meetings, right? You speak when you're spoken to. You can't really do that with the interns because of the issue of the clients wanting to talk to them all the time, right? So, they're going to have a bunch of get to know you stuff. But you want to kind of do some coaching before that client meeting, and maybe do some role plays with the interns. Just make sure they're showing up right, make sure they understand how to dress, how to show up on Zoom, what their background should look like so that they're not embarrassing. Sometimes you have to have those conversations like, hey, can you not lay down while we're talking? You know what I mean? Because look, they don't know, right? They don't know what's appropriate sometimes. Some of them show up, and especially my, but it's, it's a little, the career changers, sometimes you're fine. It's the ones who are still in college. Sometimes they don't totally get it. I would have my interns do the same work as the associate, which for me, new associates, they show up at the meeting, they take notes, and then they write a follow-up draft. They write a follow-up draft email to the client and and all the follow-up notes to put into our CRM. They send those to me, not to the client, obviously. And then I review them and send them along. And then I will kind of live correct those notes with the intern and go through and say, okay, you're going to watch me edit your text. It is excruciating for the intern because I'm sitting here telling them all about how they're wrong, right? But it is some of the best learning about how to write and how to think about what's important within a client relationship. I'll take my own notes usually when I have a new associate or an intern in there. And one of the main things I'm doing is looking at my notes about all the things that I wrote down that I thought were important, and to see what was missing from the intern's notes. And I'll say, hey, the client said this, you didn't put that in your notes. This was actually really important. They're like, it is? For what reason? And then you can explain why it's important. It is some of the best training ever. And with an associate advisor, it usually takes me about 3 months to get them till I'm willing to let them send the client the email directly without me reviewing it. sometimes more like 6 months. You're not going to get through all that with an intern. They're going to have probably 3 or 4 client meetings in a 2-week period, maybe, or a 4-week period. So, but it's some great reps for them. And do your best to schedule client meetings that they can sit in. Go and call, even if you have to go to a client and say, hey, we don't have a lot to talk about. Can we have a client meeting? I have an intern and I'd love them to meet you. Your clients are probably totally happy to do that. So you want to get as many client meetings as possible in that moment. And like I said, clients love this stuff. So this is actually a net positive for them. So don't worry about like wasting your client's time. They adore it. Now, not every client is going to adore it, right? Obviously, that's not for everyone, but you know the ones that would be the right ones for you. Research. As I mentioned, that project, it fills their free time, right? They will have free time. And you just want them to have something to do so they don't feel like they're just kind of, sitting around doing nothing. The other benefit is it gives you an opportunity to introduce the intern to other people in the industry. Whatever that research is, they need to go interview people as part of that research project. And so I would introduce my interns to all my friends in the industry and say, all my friends in the industry love this too, because now they get an opportunity to come in and speak to the intern. So it gets them practiced at networking. And then I always did a lot of coaching about networking and how to then follow up with those meetings with requests for other meetings or other times where they have questions, and just following up and keeping on in touch with those people, because most college students don't know how to network, and you need to teach them. And this gives you an opportunity to get them some experience doing that. I started with making a list of every innovation project I had thought of. Of course, my brain kind of works like that, and my list was very long of all the projects I wanted to work on. But even if you only have 2 or 3, that's okay. Anything that you're thinking about that you just don't have time to research, put on a list. About half my interns used the list, and half the interns had other ideas. And I always said yes to whatever their idea was, as long as I thought it was actually feasible and real. And then introduce that intern to everyone you can think of. It's really, really helpful. There should be a presentation component to this research project, giving these interns an opportunity to gain experience. Presenting to a scary person or scary group is important, right? Have them present to your executive team, to a board of directors, to an outside group, whatever you can think of to get them some experience kind of presenting to people who are intimidating is important. So anything you can do to add that component to it, go ahead. That said, I did have interns who got so busy that they didn't finish their research project, and that's fine because they got busy. And so they didn't go through the presentation, obviously. But this is always the lowest priority. Any questions so far? All right. Oh, wait, I do. David, what's up?
Yeah. So going back to the 3 reasons, is that part of how BLX screens firms when they're coming? Like, did you say up front, I'm looking for an intern for this specific reason, or is that just kind of you in the back of your head,
Oh, that's all me. Yeah, that's okay. I don't think that's BLX policy, but it is a good screen. If BLX were asking people, hey, why do you want an intern? If they gave an answer other than those 3, I'd be surprised, because otherwise, why waste the money and time? But I'd love to hear what some of those other reasons are. I'd add them to the presentation, because there's no wrong reason to do this, right? Well, the wrong reason is you want, a minion who will make coffee for you for 8 weeks. You know what I mean? That reason is not my favorite. Let's put it that way. I have other words that I might use to describe it if I were being less polite. I don't think that's appropriate, right? I think you should be doing these interns to help the interns, not to help you. You can do this much easier by hiring a temp, quite honestly. If you just need someone to help you out, like, this is not the best way to do it. You want to do it a different way. The interns just aren't it. Look, if I start a new job, 8 weeks in, I'm pretty sure I kind of know where the bathrooms are, but I'm not totally sure if I know where the best ones are, You know what I mean? It just takes time to drop into an organization, to drop into a new function. They get a lot of stuff done. By the end of the 8 weeks, they start to feel like family, but it's, it takes time to get people actually functional, to where it's not taking more of your time than just being on your own. So yeah, I'm sure there are other good reasons. I just haven't thought of them.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts or questions? All right, let me give you the timeline that I think about and that I used as part of this. Week 1 is nothing's going to get done, right? It's onboarding. They're going to select their projects. You're going to spend a bunch of time with them, getting to know them. You can do some mentoring. Everybody in your firm is going to get introduced, which if your firm is small, that doesn't take very much time. If you have 70 people, obviously that takes a lot of time to get everyone kind of accustomed to who the teams are. The smaller you are, the faster some of that stuff can go. But it's really just about getting to know them and giving the kind of initial training that they're going to need. Sometimes that's going to be technology training if you have them on your tech. We barely did. They didn't get involved in financial planning, and they couldn't access our CRM just because of compliance reasons that our lawyer was talking about. I think we were a little stringent on that, but also it was just, it was a lot of work to get people kind of up to speed on e-money, for example, for us to feel like it was worth it. This year, I think in the Abacus internship, they did do that, and their projects were all financial planning based. But I don't know how well that worked. But whatever you're doing, whatever technology you're going to give them, that's in week 1, right? You're going to spend probably a couple hours. If you have multiple interns, a couple hours with each one. If you have just one, then you'll probably spend more than a couple hours, really kind of dropping in and getting to know this person. So expect week 1 to be pretty heavy. I then did 3 2-week rotations with the interns. Each intern, now I had the second year I did it, I had 8 advisory teams, right? So this was a little easier. I had 4 interns and 8 advisory teams. So every intern rotated through 2 advisory teams so that every team had 1 intern for 2 weeks. If you have 1 team, then you're just going to have that intern in for 2 weeks and then maybe another 2 weeks if you follow my timeline. The smaller you are, the easier it is to just kind of ignore structure and just kind of, go with whatever's happening. I advise you to pick a structure and stick to it so that it holds you to a level of organization. I think would be very helpful. So I would still, even if you're just 1 team, have them focus with you for 2 weeks on just the client work. Then have them focus for 2 weeks on their second rotation, which would be in some aspect of your operations, whether that's if you're small, it might be all aspects of your operations, which would be client service, portfolios, marketing. Just give them a different focus. So you might want to think about your own focus over that kind of 6-week period, where maybe try and over a 2-week period, schedule as many client meetings as you can. Then over the next 2-week period, schedule no client meetings. So you have time to work kind of on the business, right? And then another 2 weeks where you schedule as many client meetings as possible. I like the 2-week, 2-week, 2-week tempo because it gets people kind of, they start getting into a rhythm, and then you break the rhythm and move them into a new rhythm, and then they get into a rhythm again, and then you break the rhythm and get them into learning again. Every time you break a rhythm, kind of neurons start firing in a different way. So I like that kind of focus, then change focus, then change focus energy, but that's just preference. If you wanted to have a structure where it's 1 week, 1 week, 1 week, 1 week, you have a structure, less of a structure than I had, where you just have it kind of more of a flow that any given day, you're like, okay, this is going to be a client day. Tomorrow it's going to be an operational day. That's fine, right? There's no problem with that. My advice is pick a timeline and a structure so you give the interns an idea of what's going to happen over the course of their whole internship. So I did this 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks rotations. If you have multiple advisory teams, that's easier than if it's just you. So you kind of gotta, think about it like your client experience. You want to create an intern experience. So kind of design it in advance how you expect it to go. The reality is, in any given moment, they might be in their operations rotation, but then a client calls up and says, hey, can I have a meeting tomorrow? I have this big issue. And you're like, hey, can my intern come? And then you have that client meeting that day because opportunistically, that's a great experience for them. So you don't have to be strict with the structure, but it's nice to have a structure to lean on. The final week is about project presentations. So whoever they're going to present to, try and schedule in the last week. That's when you have your party celebrations and whatever offboarding activities you're going to do. If you're going to do exit interviews and things like that, you do all those in that last week. If you are going to have your intern travel to you, if you're, most of these internships are remote typically, and all my interns were remote. None of them traveled in to our office. But if you're going to have them travel into your office, the last week is a great time to do that. The first week is also a great time to do that. You can pick your poison, or you can do both. I think that's fine. Obviously, if your intern's in person, the final week is the time to do your big pizza party or whatever you're going to do, or celebration or happy hours or things like that. Make the last week fun so they get to be sent off on a high note. Questions on this one? All right, here are some considerations and lessons learned. First thing, forget about productivity. Your intern is not going to be productive for you. Any attempt at having your intern be productive will take more of your time than it would take you to just do it yourself, right? So it's fine to have your intern do productive stuff. Just recognize that it's going to be a time sink, not a time saver. This is a gift to your interns, right? You are helping them explore a new profession. And it is on all, I think, in all of professional services, but especially in financial advice, we don't have enough financial advisors, which means it is on us to make sure that we are developing the profession. And this is one of the best ways to do that. So this is you taking that time to give back to the industry so that industry can support you as you mature and your business matures and you age and you get closer to being at that point where you want someone to take over your firm. This creates the situation where there will be people to take over your firm. If we do not do this, you will not have people to take over your firm. Right? This is absolutely, in my mind, the duty of a professional. You don't have to do it this way, but you have to find ways to help other people join the profession. And this is my favorite way. So solos versus teams. As I mentioned, my experience is running multiple interns for multiple teams, right? I can speak a lot to what it takes to run multiple people through a confusing structured business, right? For those people. With 4 interns, it required, between me and kind of my admin person, it was probably 20 hours a week of my time and maybe 25 to 30 hours a week of his time for 8 weeks, plus all the prep leading up to it. And then the time afterwards where I met with, I still meet with most of the interns on a, quarterly or annual basis. They'd reach out to me all the time. And I have quick chats. If they're in town, I'll stop in and have a drink. I still know all these people. It's fantastic. My guess is, if you have a good project work for them, it's probably, 8 to 10 hours a week of your time, maybe 10 to 15 direct, kind of managing the intern. So it's a, decent amount of work, but it is absolutely worth it. But it is a project, right? So you're not going to come in and have an intern if you're a solo and you have an intern with you for 8 weeks, they don't just keep themselves busy. You gotta spend some time with them. It is by far worth it, right? Just like, when I hang out with, toddlers, it's totally worth it. But when I'm hanging out with toddlers, it takes, not comparing the interns to toddlers. I'm just, but it definitely takes a lot of time to hang out with toddlers, but you get done and you might be a little tired. I certainly am. But you feel fulfilled because you were doing something really fun. Okay. If you're recruiting and it's just you, whatever, do it however you want to. But if you have any team members on your team and you're thinking about hiring one of these interns, make sure that everyone knows that walking in, that this is part of your strategy, that everyone involved in your organization knows it's part of your strategy and you build it into your strategy. When in the second year, we were doing our internship. It was, I think we started mid-June through mid-August. And we were in an executive meeting and we were talking about our hiring plans for the year. And our head of advisors said, hey, I'm planning on hiring two new associate advisors in June. And I'm like, we have an internship that's starting in June and ending in August. Maybe we should hire 2 associates in August instead, so we can maybe have our interns be potential people we could hire. And everyone goes, oh, right. Yeah, I didn't think of that. Right. And that could have been a big miss. Instead, we hired 2 people from the internship. And we got to know them really well, and they're doing fantastic because, we knew they were going to be amazing fits because we had 8 weeks with them. So just make sure you're building this. If you're doing this for recruiting and planning to hire, which I heavily recommend, build it into the flow and of your strategy. Like don't hire a bunch of people right before the internship is what I'm saying. But also make sure that if you have a particular hiring process, make your interns go through that process after the internship. You're going to know them really well. You're going to think you can skip steps, but you probably didn't do all those same steps in the internship. So make sure that all those steps are done, even if you're doing them inside the internship where you're kind of stretching that internship and making it an extended job interview. Make sure you hit all the same beats. You ask all the same questions and you document it in the same way. My recommendation is to have them go through the formal hiring process post-internship, make them apply. It'll feel different. We didn't do that for all of the interns we hired. In fact, I think for one of our interns, we gave her a job offer on like day 2 of the internship. It was just obvious. But I don't think that benefited her, right? I think it would have been better had she gone through the whole process, because then everyone would have felt like, we were performing our same due diligence. But the key is make sure everyone's on board for what you're trying to do here. Here's a giant long list of all the research projects that I presented to my interns to work on. Probably about 6 of these were ended up worked on, and the other ones were ones that the intern said, hey, that sounds great, but I'd rather work on this. Is that okay? Like, yeah, of course it is. And they were really cool projects because you're talking about something that people were very passionate about. So I would sit down with all the interns. I gave them this whole long list. I described some of the projects. I had generally 1 or 2 that I would suggest to each intern. I had someone who was working as a tax preparer, and I said, hey, do you want to do a research project on adding tax preparation since you have already a bunch of knowledge about it? Or would you prefer to do something that you don't have the knowledge about? And she said, no, I'll do the tax preparation one. It's a great opportunity to show off, right, for her. I had another one who was trained in learning management systems. It was a career changer, and her prior career was developing learning management systems for universities and building curriculum. And she went in and said, hey, how about for my project, I go into your coursework on your kind of Abacus Academy and tell you about all the areas you can improve it. And I'm like, done. This is the best project ever, right? I never would have let another intern do that project because they wouldn't have had the background to have it make any sense, right? But for her, we were able to leverage her expertise, and it worked really, really well. And I think a lot of her suggestions were indeed implemented. So the more you can tap into their own expertise, I feel like that's better if you can find that link. And sometimes you don't have it. Like I said, I had that one intern who just didn't have the experience required to kind of do any of these projects. It was they needed to learn more stuff and more background before they could. So I loaned that intern to a firm who we were tightly connected with, and she did that project interviewing board members of these companies that they were researching. And for her, it was the best 2 weeks that she had. It was amazing. She had such a great experience, really learning how to do some kind of detailed administrative work, but that felt meaningful to her. So anything you can come up with is fine. You could loan your interns to your clients for that matter. If they have cool companies that they need a little bit of help, right? You're here to be their guide. And if you can find a good experience for them, make it happen. All right, some final thoughts. I've given you a lot of shoulds. I've given you a lot of advice in this talk. The goal is to make sure your interns have a good time and a good fulfilling time and learn a lot of things. If something's not working well for them, if they seem unhappy, or if you're not enjoying your time, change it immediately. Just shift it so that everyone's having a good time. Find a better way if it's not flowing, right? This should be the summer camp part of your year, right? It shouldn't be tedious. It should, when it's over, everyone should be crying. I am notoriously bad when this stuff ends. I'm like weeping all over the place. I'm getting a little teary-eyed just thinking about the end of the internship from 2 years ago. You know what I mean? It's silly, right? And yet it's like your camp friends, right? When you were young and you'd have those 8 weeks with people and then it's over and they're friends for life, right? And that's what happens if you do this right. So make it happen. Someone needs to check in on your interns daily. If you're a solo, you have a morning meeting or an afternoon meeting or a noon meeting or whatever time you want to have that meeting, you talk to them every day. If you have multiple team members, it doesn't have to be you then, but someone checks in on that intern every day. At least think of it like an hour a day, right? Book an hour-long meeting every day. If you have multiple interns, you can task your interns with checking in on each other every day. So that actually helps. I was talking about associate advisors the other day, and someone was asking me, should we just hired 2, but this person left. Should I hire another one? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. It's way less work to hire 3 interns than 1 intern because they keep each other busy. They're like puppies. You know what I mean? If you have 3 puppies, they're much more well-behaved than if you have 1 puppy. 1 puppy gets bored and you need to make sure that puppy is getting a lot of love and attention. When you have 3, they just roll around with each other, right? My interns scheduled meetings. They created projects. They just did stuff together without asking. Because they're like, oh, let's do this. And then they just did it because, they had backup, right? They had their little squad that maneuvered together through the internships. So don't neglect them. They cannot be neglected. If you've raised puppies, you know what happens when things get bored, you know what I mean? Like the furniture gets chewed on, right? It won't be a good experience with neglect. Main goal is exposure, right? Just if there's nothing to do, make up something to do that gives them exposure. Go through a client, say, hey, I want to talk you through this client. Just pick some stuff. Think of a client who's maybe you've been neglecting a little while, and go into that client and talk your intern through that client and think of things you can do for the client. If it's a client that you're not going to be able to bring them to the meeting, have them in prep for the meeting you're going to have later. If you're working on a big project, bring them into that. Just find as much varied stuff as possible. This is about broad exposure. This is a survey course in financial planning, right? Make sure they see as much stuff as possible. And then the final one, I think I mentioned before, research project is lowest priority. If you're able to keep that intern busy for 8 weeks without a research project, then skip it, right? It has some benefits, but probably the other stuff you're doing is more important. Quite honestly, if you're having them do something that the research project is more important than, that don't have them do that other thing, right? Just have them do the research project instead. So I would focus on, don't hold the research project as a prerequisite for kind of graduation is what I'm saying, right? If they don't finish it, who cares, right? Just let it go. If they do finish it, that's great. They got that experience, but don't stress out about it. Right. Now I mentioned I mentioned something that I learned a lesson on. The first year I did the internship, I had 6 interns. And the way I structured it is I had 2 interns start, and then 4 weeks later, 2 more interns start, and then 4 weeks later, 2 more interns start. So I had this staggered duos over, which pushed it into 16 weeks of internship. That was horrible. It was really hard. By the last 4 weeks, I was totally done. Right. So like the last 4 weeks of the internship, like the last half of the internship for the final 2, I was a bit of a zombie. So I don't recommend that structure. So rolling internships, I tried. If you think, what could be cool is if I have like 2 here and, or I don't want multiples at a time. It's too many people at one time. Don't just, it was a lot. So highly don't recommend doing it that way. The next year we had all 4 interns start, and they were there for the 8 weeks altogether. That was glorious. It worked really well. The second thing I learned that I wanted to mention was around where am I at there? I wanted to mention, the composition of who you're targeting as the interns. So I tried to have half my interns be either recent graduates or kind of in that junior to senior year, and the other half to be career changers. If you have multiple interns, having that split is helpful, because what you end up having is your career changers end up being able to do a little bit of mentoring with your recent graduates. They take on kind of a, big sibling role, if that makes sense. And that gives your kind of more experienced interns a chance to show off their ability to mentor and lead. And I think that is a really valuable thing to kind of, test them on if you're considering hiring them, but also just, I think it's fulfilling for them as well. They like helping other people. And you do also get a sense of how people are able to be coached by others and how well people are able to coach others, which obviously, if you're considering people to be an advisor, that's a very valuable skill to test out. Both their ability to be coached and their ability to coach. And even sometimes your newer, younger, less experienced interns end up getting a chance to do some coaching on some of the other interns as well, even some of the career changers. Because your career changers maybe know less about financial planning than your recent graduates if they came from a financial planning program. So someone graduating from Texas Tech or Kansas State, they've just graduated with a financial planning degree. You might have a career changing intern who's just starting their first class of financial planning, or your first or second. And so you have this kind of back and forth ability for your interns who have work experience to mentor in kind of how to show up in the business world, while you have your new recent graduate students coming in saying, yeah, that's awesome, thank you for that, let me tell you all about how to gauge annuities, you know what I mean, and how to do life insurance reviews, because they've been studying this for the last 4 years. Those are the big 2 learnings. The most important thing, though, of all of it is this is your opportunity to make things fun, right? The biggest advice I have, and if you do nothing else that you've heard from me on this call, the biggest rule is make it fun. So please make it fun. Make it fun for you, make it fun for them. At the end of 8 weeks, if you've made it fun, you're not gonna feel bad about having done this. You're gonna feel great about having done this, because even if you didn't hire the person, even if it doesn't increase your recruiting funnel of people who are interested in you, even if that person decides they don't want to even be a financial planner, you had fun for 8 weeks, right? And this is cheaper than a luxury cruise, right? There are definitely vacations I've spent more on than than having an intern over the summer. So this is a pretty cheap way to have fun for 8 weeks, right? 2 months of fun. It's a pretty small price to pay. And at the end of the day, I found this to be extremely worth it. I can't begin to list all the ways in which this was a good idea for us. The team was amazing. Suzanne's firm, I've never met a better recruiter. They will find you interns you will love, I promise. Of course, my direction to Suzanne was always send me the weirdest ones, and those are my favorite. So I got some weird ones, but it all worked out perfectly because I tend to do well with the weird ones. All right, as we get toward wrapping up, we have time for some questions. So who wants to chat?
Hey, JD, Louis Rosa here. Thank you again for
Hey.
being here. Good to see you. Yeah, no, just wanted to thank you for doing this overall, but also bringing up the career changers. I think that a lot of people, when they think of interns, they automatically assume just like a young, fresh face out of college, right? And we find that the career changers have a lot of transferable skills that could apply to financial planning and just being part of your team, you know, that some people might overlook because they don't meet the traditional requirements that are, you know, typically when you see a job posting out there, right? We want someone who went through a financial planning program and maybe they have already 1 to 3 years experience and so on. So, you know, just a comment, basically, no question, but thank you for bringing that up. I think a very important point.
No, that's thank you for highlighting that. It's really, really important. Career changers, I review a lot of job descriptions for my clients, right? And every once in a while you run into that classic, I want to hire a new associate advisor with 1 to 3 years experience in a wealth management firm. And my immediate response is, yeah, delete that. That's useless. First of all, you know, there are lots of good reasons that people leave after 1 to 3 years in an advisory firm and need a different job, right? I know a lot of firms that I don't like, and I don't think working there would be all that fun. And if someone leaves 1 to 3 years from those firms, like, okay, I get it. You know, it wasn't working for you. They were having you make coffee for 3 years. You know what I mean? Like, I can see why someone might want to leave, right? But what that tells me is anyone with 1 to 3 years in an advisory firm is either traumatized or not good, right? One of the two things happened for them to leave. Either they had a really bad experience because the firm was bad, or they had a really bad experience because they were bad. There are also some people who left for very good reasons, and they'd be great hires. I'm not saying never hire someone with 1 to 3 years experience, but there's not a lot of them, right? And what people are doing when they put 1 to 3 years experience, I believe, is that what they're really saying is, I want someone who I don't have to teach to wear a clean shirt to a client meeting, right? I want someone who knows what's up and who is going to be able to learn in advance quickly. Someone with, you know, 1 to 3 years or 5 or 10 years experience in the work world, not at a wealth management firm, versus someone with 1 to 3 years at a wealth management firm, the speed at which those people will progress, and I've hired and trained dozens of associate advisors. I've seen all types. Recent graduates train slower than people with experience. No question. A recent graduate, probably 3 years to train versus on average 2 years for someone with experience, right? Someone with a lot of experience, maybe it's more like 1 year, right? That whether that experience is in a wealth management firm or in any other job doesn't matter. If someone has 10 years experience in kind of business out in the world and maybe, you know, they've been implementing, you know, learning management systems, or they've been a tax preparer, or they worked in an accounting department or whatever, right? If they have business experience versus experience in a wealth management firm, the fact that they were at a wealth management firm does not increase the speed at which they train. Work experience does. Life experience definitely does. But experience in a wealth management firm doesn't. And the reason I believe that's true, and I don't know why it's true, but the reason I believe it's true is that any advantage they have from having learned someone else's wealth management process is offset by the fact that you have to detrain them, right? You have to train them away from their old process that they learned and into the new process. And so when you have that situation with people who have wealth management experience, first you have to teach them what not to do, then you have to teach them what to do, right? It's probably faster to teach them what to do, but because you have to like erase all that old knowledge, it ends up taking about the same amount of time, right? So I love career changers. They train so fast. And if you can get complementary career changers, like people who come in from being a tax preparer in an accounting department, anywhere where they had access to financial statements and things like that, and they know what an income statement is, you know, man, those people. I had one guy, he came, he was a controller for Wells Fargo. He went from associate advisor to lead advisor in 6 months.
Wow.
Right? It's super fast. He was already there, right? He had a CPA. This is easy, right? It's easy to train CPAs how to be wealth managers, right? They kind of already know, right? But quite honestly, I also had someone who was a principal of an elementary school go from associate advisor to lead advisor in 6 months. I didn't have to teach her how to talk about taboo subjects with people. She knows how to deal with people who come into meetings all emotional, right? She's dealing with the one thing that's more taboo than people's money, and that's their kids, right? All she needed to learn was the technical stuff. That stuff learns easy. Teaching someone to have the emotional intelligence to understand how psychology affects behavior, right? Teachers and anyone involved in education has to know that, or they quit a long time before. So that experience level is life experience. So if you have job descriptions, it's okay to say you want someone with experience. Try not to have that be limited to wealth management, right? So thank you, Luis, for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Got a few more minutes, I think. Got 1 more minute.
While we're waiting for any more questions, we just want to remind everyone attending that there is still time to apply to the BLX internship program. If you're interested in participating, please visit our website, blxinternship.org/apply. And you can also reach us through email at info@blxinternship as well. Feel free to send us any questions you guys have. JD, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate all of your tips and your great presentation. So thank you for being here.
Oh, no problem. And if there were questions you had that you didn't want to ask in a group setting, you can all feel free to contact me later.
Perfect. Thank you all for being here today.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
JD.
Bye.